exits often create the loudest questions. One day a person is always there, always listening, always understanding, always giving second chances. Then suddenly they are gone. No arguments, no dramatic goodbye, no final warning, just silence. And that silence leaves people confused. Many believe empaths leave without warning. They believe an empath wakes up one day, decides they no longer care, and cuts someone out of their life forever. But the truth is far more complex and far more heartbreaking. What most people never see is the long emotional journey that happens before the goodbye. They never see the countless disappointments that were forgiven. They never see the boundaries that were quietly ignored. They never see the nights spent questioning whether to stay or walk away. By the time an empath finally cuts someone off, the decision often began months or even years earlier. The final exit is not usually the start of the story. It is the end of a very long chapter filled with patience, hope, and emotional exhaustion. What makes this even more fascinating is that many empaths are not known for giving up on people. In fact, they are often the last people to walk away. They see potential where others see problems. They see pain behind bad behavior. They keep believing things can improve even when all evidence points in the opposite direction. This is why their final decision can feel so shocking. Not because it happened suddenly, but because nobody noticed the emotional distance growing beneath the surface. And there is a hidden psychological reason why this pattern happens so often. A reason that most people completely misunderstand. In this video, we are going to uncover why empaths stay longer than they should, why they tolerate behavior that would push others away much sooner, what happens inside their mind before they finally reach their limit, and why their goodbye often feels cold, permanent, and impossible to reverse. We will also explore the silent warning signs that appear long before the cutoff happens, signs that most people miss until it is far too late. Along the way, you may discover that what looks like a sudden decision is actually the result of hundreds of invisible moments that slowly changed everything. The deeper we go, the more surprising this story becomes. Because the thing that finally causes an empath to walk away is rarely what people expect. And understanding that truth may completely change the way you view relationships, trust, forgiveness, and emotional boundaries. So stay with us until the very end, because the final lesson may reveal why some of the kindest people become the hardest people to get back once they decide to leave. Welcome to the channel. If you enjoy deep psychology, emotional intelligence, and powerful insights into human behavior, make sure to subscribe and join our community for more videos like this. What many people fail to understand is that empaths notice far more than they reveal. They are often deeply aware of emotional shifts, changes in tone, hidden frustrations, and unspoken intentions. They notice when someone's words no longer match their actions. They notice when respect begins to disappear. They notice when effort becomes one-sided. They notice when appreciation turns into expectation. Yet despite seeing these things, they often choose not to react immediately. They tell themselves there must be a reason, there must be an explanation. There must be a misunderstanding. This is where people become confused. They assume silence means nothing is wrong. They assume patience means everything is fine. They assume the empath has forgotten. But that is rarely the case. Every ignored feeling leaves a mark. Every broken promise creates another crack in trust. Every moment of disrespect becomes another piece of information stored quietly in the background. An empath may not confront every issue the moment it happens. They may not start an argument. They may not demand explanations, but internally they are paying attention. They are collecting evidence. They are observing patterns, and patterns matter far more to an empath than isolated mistakes. Anyone can have a bad day. Anyone can make a poor decision. Anyone can say the wrong thing. Empaths understand that human beings are imperfect. In fact, their ability to understand imperfection is one of their greatest strengths. But that same strength can become a trap. Because when someone continuously repeats the same harmful behavior, the empath often keeps searching for reasons instead of recognizing the reality standing in front of them. This is why many empaths stay much longer than they should. They do not leave at the first warning sign. They do not walk away after one disappointment. They do not immediately cut people off after one argument or one mistake. Instead, they try to understand. They try to communicate. They try to fix what is broken. They spend enormous amounts of emotional energy searching for solutions. When someone hurts them, their first instinct is often not self-protection. Their first instinct is understanding. They ask themselves questions that other people rarely ask. Maybe this person is struggling. Maybe they are overwhelmed. Maybe they are dealing with pain they have never shared. Maybe stress is making them act differently. Maybe they do not realize how much damage they are causing. Maybe things will improve with time. These thoughts can keep an empath invested in unhealthy relationships for months or even years. While others focus on behavior, empaths often focus on potential. They see who a person could become. They see the good qualities hidden beneath the flaws. They see moments of kindness mixed in with moments of neglect. They see occasional effort surrounded by consistent disappointment. And because they focus on potential, they continue hoping for change. They continue believing that if they explain themselves one more time, things will improve. If they stay patient a little longer, things will improve. If they love harder, give more, understand more, forgive more, things will improve. The difficult reality is that potential and reality are not the same thing. Potential lives in the future. Reality exists in the present. An empath may see a person's best qualities with incredible clarity, but eventually reality begins demanding attention. Eventually, the gap between what someone could be and what they actually are becomes impossible to ignore. Yet even then, many empaths continue trying. They become emotional problem solvers. They become relationship caretakers. They become the person who keeps everything together while everyone else simply participates. Over time, this creates an invisible imbalance. The empath becomes the emotional foundation of the relationship. They become the one checking in, the one initiating difficult conversations, the one apologizing first, the one trying to restore peace. The one carrying emotional responsibility that should be shared by two people. At first, this effort may feel manageable. It may even feel natural. Many empaths are accustomed to supporting others. They are accustomed to helping people through difficult times. But there is a difference between support and sacrifice. There is a difference between helping someone and carrying them. There is a difference between compassion and self-abandonment. As the imbalance grows, a subtle shift begins taking place. It is rarely dramatic. There is usually no major event announcing its arrival. Instead, emotional exhaustion starts developing quietly beneath the surface. This is the stage that most people never see. They notice the empath's kindness. They notice their patience. They notice their willingness to stay, but they do not notice the emotional cost. They do not see how much energy is being spent maintaining the relationship. They do not see how much disappointment is being absorbed. They do not see how many needs are being ignored. The empath starts feeling tired in a way that sleep cannot fix. It is not physical exhaustion. It is emotional exhaustion. The kind of exhaustion that comes from carrying feelings that are not yours. The kind that comes from constantly giving without receiving the same effort in return. The kind that develops when understanding becomes a one-way street. Day after day, the empath continues showing up, continues listening, continues supporting, continues caring, but internally the emotional reserves are slowly draining. At this stage, changes begin appearing. Small changes at first. The empath becomes quieter. They stop sharing as much. They stop explaining every feeling. They stop initiating conversations with the same enthusiasm. They stop expecting change. This is often misunderstood by the people around them. Many assume the situation has improved. They assume the absence of complaints means the problem has disappeared. They assume the empath has finally accepted things as they are. In reality, the opposite may be happening. The empath may be reaching a point where they no longer believe their words matter. They may be realizing that repeating the same conversation produces the same result. They may be discovering that understanding someone does not automatically create change. This realization is painful because empaths genuinely want to believe people can grow. They want to believe relationships can heal. They want to believe effort will be met with effort. But when the same patterns continue repeating, hope begins weakening. The person on the receiving end often misses this entire process. They see less conflict and assume everything is fine. They see less emotion and assume everything is stable. They see fewer complaints and assume the issues are resolved. They do not recognize that the empath's silence may actually signal emotional withdrawal. The energy that once fueled endless patience is beginning to disappear. And this is where the relationship approaches a critical turning point. Most people think relationships end because of one major event, one explosive argument, one shocking betrayal, one unforgettable mistake. While those events can certainly play a role, many empath cutoffs happen for a completely different reason. The real cause is often repetition. Not one incident, not one disappointment, not one failure, Repetition, the same behavior repeated over and over again. The same promise broken repeatedly. The same boundary ignored repeatedly. The same hurt dismissed repeatedly. The same effort left unreturned repeatedly. Empaths are remarkably tolerant of isolated mistakes. What becomes difficult for them is witnessing the same pattern continue despite awareness. They communicate their discomfort, sometimes directly, sometimes indirectly, sometimes through calm conversations, sometimes through subtle changes in behavior. But the message remains the same. This hurts. This matters. This cannot continue forever. When nothing changes, a painful realization begins forming. The empath starts understanding that the issue is not a lack of awareness. The issue is a lack of action. The other person may understand perfectly well. They may know exactly what is causing pain. They may have heard the concerns many times. Yet the behavior continues. This is the moment where disappointment starts transforming into something deeper. Because there is a profound difference between being misunderstood and being ignored. Being misunderstood leaves room for clarification. Being ignored leaves room for resignation. The empath begins recognizing that care is not measured by words alone. It is measured by behavior. It is measured by effort. It is measured by the willingness to make meaningful changes when someone you value is hurting. And when those changes never arrive, the emotional damage accumulates. What makes this process so difficult is that it rarely happens overnight. It develops slowly. Each ignored boundary adds another layer of frustration. Each repeated disappointment adds another layer of exhaustion. Each failed attempt at communication adds another layer of emotional distance. Eventually, the empath begins protecting themselves in subtle ways. They share less, expect less, invest less, hope less. The relationship may still appear normal from the outside. Conversations continue, interactions continue, daily routines continue. Yet internally, a transformation is taking place. The empath is no longer looking at isolated incidents. They are looking at patterns. And patterns tell stories that excuses cannot erase. Little by little, the emotional connection begins changing. Not because the empath suddenly stops caring, but because caring without change becomes painful. Caring without respect becomes exhausting. Caring without reciprocity becomes unsustainable. The same heart that once fought to keep the relationship alive begins questioning how much longer it can continue carrying the weight alone. And once that realization starts settling into place, everything begins to change. There comes a moment in many unhealthy relationships that almost nobody recognizes when it is happening. It is not loud, it is not dramatic, there is no major confrontation announcing its arrival. In fact, from the outside, it often looks like everything is finally getting better. The arguments become less frequent. The difficult conversations start disappearing. The empath seems calmer, more relaxed, less emotional, less invested in every disagreement. To the other person, this can feel like progress. They may believe the tension is fading. They may think the empath has finally accepted the situation. They may even feel relieved that the constant discussions have ended. But beneath the surface, something entirely different is taking place. This is often the most important stage of all. The empath stops fighting for the relationship. For a long time, the empath tried everything they knew. They explained their feelings. They communicated their needs. They gave examples. They offered solutions. They started difficult conversations that nobody else wanted to have. They searched for common ground. They tried to create understanding. Even when they felt hurt, they continued believing that honest communication could repair the damage. They believed that if someone truly understood the pain they were causing, meaningful change would follow. That belief kept them trying long after most people would have walked away. But eventually, a painful truth begins revealing itself. The same conversations keep happening. The same promises keep being made. The same disappointments keep returning. The empath begins noticing that every explanation sounds familiar. Every apology sounds familiar. Every excuse sounds familiar. The words may change slightly, but the pattern remains the same. This realization does not happen all at once. It develops slowly through repeated experiences. One day the empath notices they are explaining themselves less. Another day they notice they no longer have the energy to start another discussion. Then they realize they are no longer expecting things to improve. This is not because they suddenly stopped caring. It is because they have become emotionally exhausted from caring without seeing meaningful change. At first, they still try. Then they try less often. Then they only bring up issues when absolutely necessary. Eventually, they stop bringing them up at all. Not because the problems disappeared, not because they are no longer hurt, But because they no longer believe their words will make a difference, there is a major difference between giving up on a person and giving up on the idea that your efforts can change the situation. Many empaths reach the second point long before they reach the first. The most tragic part is that this stage is often misunderstood. The other person notices less conflict and assumes the relationship is becoming healthier. They do not realize that the empath's silence may actually be a sign of emotional withdrawal. They do not recognize that the energy once spent fighting for connection is slowly disappearing. They mistake peace for healing when it may actually be detachment. The empath begins pulling back emotionally. They stop sharing every thought. They stop discussing every concern. They stop seeking reassurance. They stop asking for understanding. The emotional investment that once fueled endless patience starts fading. Little by little, they begin preparing themselves for a future that may not include the relationship at all. This process is deeply painful because empaths rarely walk away without first exhausting every possibility they can think of. They replay conversations in their minds. They question their decisions. They wonder whether they are asking for too much. They wonder whether they are being unfair. They wonder whether they should try one more time. They spend countless hours analyzing situations from every angle. They search for answers. They search for hope. They search for evidence that things can still improve. But eventually, hope starts running out. And when hope disappears, the conflict often disappears with it. Not because the problems have been solved, because the empath is no longer trying to solve them. They are no longer fighting for understanding. They are no longer fighting for effort. They are no longer fighting for change. They are quietly preparing to let go. This is why the final cutoff feels so sudden to everyone else. The person being left often focuses on the final moment. They focus on the day communication stopped, the day the empath walked away, the day the relationship ended. To them, it feels abrupt, unexpected, confusing. They wonder how everything changed so quickly. What they do not realize is that the real ending happened long before the official goodbye. The empath has already spent months grieving, months accepting painful truths, months letting go of expectations, months confronting disappointment, months facing the reality they desperately hoped would not be true. The grieving process happened while the relationship was still technically alive, while conversations were still happening, while messages were still being exchanged, while appearances still suggested everything was normal. By the time the empath finally leaves, much of the emotional processing has already been completed. That is why their departure often appears so calm. And that calmness creates another misunderstanding. When empaths finally decide to leave, people are frequently shocked by how different they seem. The same person who once cared deeply now appears detached. The same person who once fought for the relationship now seems certain. The same person who once gave endless chances now appears unwilling to give even one more. To someone who did not witness the internal journey, this change can feel cold. But what appears cold is often emotional exhaustion reaching its final stage. The empath is not becoming heartless. They are becoming clear. For months, maybe even years, they have been carrying emotional weight that nobody else could see. They have questioned themselves repeatedly. They have revisited memories. They have analyzed conversations. They have wondered whether they were expecting too much or asking for too little. They have fought internal battles that never became visible to the outside world. Every disappointment required processing. Every broken promise required processing. Every ignored boundary required processing. Every failed attempt at communication required processing. This emotional labor happened long before the relationship ended, while everyone else continued moving forward normally. The empath was slowly confronting the reality of what the relationship had become. Eventually, a point arrives where there is nothing left to analyze, nothing left to explain, nothing left to negotiate. The empath reaches clarity, and clarity often looks surprisingly calm. Many people expect emotional endings to be dramatic. They expect shouting, tears, arguments, long speeches. They expect visible signs of heartbreak. But empath cutoffs frequently look very different. There may be no final confrontation, no emotional explosion, no desperate attempt to change someone's mind, no lengthy explanation. The empath already delivered those explanations months ago. Perhaps years ago, the conversations already happened. The warnings already existed. The opportunities for change were already provided. Repeating them one more time no longer feels necessary. This is why the final goodbye may be nothing more than silence. Not because the empath lacks emotions, because they have already felt those emotions. Not because they do not care, because they cared for longer than most people realize. Not because they want revenge, because they have reached acceptance. The emotional storm happened privately. The calm comes afterward. To outsiders, this calmness can feel shocking. They may interpret it as indifference. They may interpret it as cruelty. They may wonder how someone who once cared so deeply can suddenly appear so unaffected. But the appearance is often misleading. The empath is not unaffected. They are finished processing. There is a profound difference between those two things. Someone who is still fighting for the relationship reacts emotionally because hope still exists. Someone who has completed the grieving process often appears calmer because the battle is already over. And this leads to one of the biggest misunderstandings surrounding empath cutoffs. Many people believe the cutoff is meant to punish. They assume it is a form of revenge, a way to make someone suffer, a way to teach someone a lesson. But in most cases, that interpretation misses the truth entirely. The empath is usually not trying to hurt anyone. They are trying to stop hurting themselves. That distinction changes everything. For years, many empaths focus almost entirely on other people's emotions. They worry about making others uncomfortable. They worry about causing disappointment. They worry about hurting feelings. They worry about being misunderstood. They become experts at understanding everyone else's perspective. What they often struggle with is extending that same care toward themselves. They become so focused on preserving relationships that they neglect their own emotional well-being. They become so focused on maintaining peace that they tolerate situations that continuously drain them. They become so focused on understanding others that they stop asking whether others are making the same effort to understand them. At first, this feels noble. It feels compassionate. It feels selfless. But over time, the cost becomes impossible to ignore. Every relationship requires boundaries. Without boundaries, kindness becomes exhaustion. Without boundaries, generosity becomes depletion. Without boundaries, empathy becomes self-neglect. Eventually, the empath begins recognizing a difficult truth. Caring about someone does not require accepting harmful behavior forever. Loving someone does not require sacrificing emotional health indefinitely. Understanding someone's pain does not mean tolerating endless disrespect. This realization can be life-changing. For years, the empath may have believed that being a good person meant enduring more than they should. They may have believed that patience alone could save any relationship. They may have believed that enough understanding could overcome any obstacle. Then reality teaches a different lesson. Healthy relationships require effort from both sides, respect from both sides, growth from both sides, responsibility from both sides. When those elements are missing, compassion alone cannot sustain the connection. The empath slowly begins understanding that protecting their peace is not selfish. Protecting their energy is not cruel. Protecting their emotional well-being is not a betrayal of their caring nature. It is a necessary act of self-respect. And once this understanding takes root, their entire perspective begins changing. The guilt that once kept them trapped starts weakening. The fear of disappointing others starts losing power. The belief that they must endlessly endure starts fading. For the first time, they begin viewing their own needs as important, not more important than everyone else's, but equally important. And that shift transforms the way they approach relationships, boundaries, trust, and the people they allow into their lives. The truth is, the reason empaths cut people off without warning is not because they suddenly stopped caring. It is because they finally stopped sacrificing themselves. By the time an empath walks away, they have usually spent months and sometimes years fighting for a connection that was slowly breaking their heart. They gave chances that nobody remembers. They overlooked mistakes that others would never tolerate. They carried conversations, repaired conflicts, and held relationships together with hope alone. While everyone else saw patience, they were carrying pain. While everyone else saw understanding, they were carrying disappointment. And while everyone else believed the relationship was secure, the empath was quietly reaching their limit. Most empath cutoffs are not impulsive decisions. They are the final chapter of a story that lasted far longer than it should have. A story filled with second chances, third chances, endless benefit of the doubt. The empath waited, hoped, explained, forgave, then repeated the cycle again and again because they believed people could change, because they believed love was worth fighting for, because they believed understanding could heal what was broken. But